This is a 2007 Ford Focus, and today I'm going to be showing how to do an easy power steering fluid flush. It actually will only have a budget of under $10 as we're going to be using a turkey baster in order to get the power steering fluid out. While there are definitely more sophisticated ways of doing a power steering flush, the honest truth is that you don't really need to spend that much in order to do this. All you really need is a simple turkey baster. Remember, since we're going to be using power steering fluid or transmission fluid, you're not going to want to use this again on any food. For the Ford Focus, it calls for Mercon V transmission fluid. This is the same stuff that goes into your transmission. And we're also going to be using a pan that we use to catch normal fluids. Alternatively, if you have any kind of siphon, this is one that I purchased. It's a simple vacuum siphon. This can work as well for this purpose. So first things first, let's find where the power steering fluid reservoir is located. Here we're looking at the engine from the front of the engine compartment. And if you look just down to the bottom left, you'll see power steering fluid cap right there. So this is where the power steering reservoir is located. If you look on the side, let's see if I can get into focus here. If you look on the side, you'll see a minimum and maximum line. So ultimately, we're going to want to look to see if our power steering fluid is located in between those two dashes. This is something that's good to check every couple of months. Now, there isn't necessarily a recommended change interval for power steering fluid. Oftentimes, the best way to determine if you need to do a power steering flush is to simply look at the color of the fluid and see if it still has its original red color. So before we check out the fluid, you want to look around the cap, make sure there isn't any dirt buildup or any gunk. If there is, you want to try to wipe that away so it doesn't contaminate or have a risk of getting into the reservoir. So we'll go ahead and take it off. Then you can look down in and see. Now I'm going to use a white paper towel here to check the color of the fluid. So I'll go ahead and dip it in. You can see. And it looks pretty red, and admittedly, I've already done a portion of the power steering fluid flush a couple weeks ago, so we're going to see some good red coloration in there. The color you're definitely looking for is if the fluid is not red, if it's maybe brown or black. That indicates that the fluid has worn through and that it's in need of replacing. Now, before we do the power steering flush, the best thing to do is get the engine up to temperature, and that way we're able to be sure that the power steering fluid has been able to work its way through the system. Admittedly, I'm still getting the engine up to temperature here, but I'll show you what you want to do as you're moving around or once you're in park and getting it up to temperature. All you want to simply do is just start rotating the wheel all the way right and all the way left until you hit the locking position. And you want to do this a number of times, especially if you're driving around. Be sure you're getting those turns. The reason why we want to do this is so that the power steering fluid is able to work its way throughout the entire system. That way we're able to try to capture as much of the old fluid as possible. So once we have the engine warmed up and the power steering fluid properly circulated through the system, we can go ahead and get ready to take out the fluid. So I just simply grabbed my pan here. I have the turkey baster. You can buy one of these for a couple of bucks at your local appliance store, Walmart, anywhere. And all we have to do is just simply take off the cap. There we go. And let me be sure to move the pan close here. That way we avoid dripping. You definitely don't want to drip so much. And all you have to do is simply take the turkey baster, give it a squeeze before you put it in. Kind of put it down in there and let it do its work. It's going to suck that up. You can see it work in there. You can see some brown fluid in there. All right, and then I'm actually going to tip this while we're still over that. That way I'm able to capture the fluid in there. And then simply put it in my catch pan here. You can also use a bottle. If you use a waste fluid bottle, you can use that as well. And all you want to do is just be sure to get as much fluid out as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and go back in. Go for it again. You'll start getting some bubbles. That means you're definitely getting to the bottom part. We're going to keep doing this back and forth until we get as much out as possible. Now, once we have as much of the fluid out of the power steering reservoir as possible, we can go ahead and get ready to put in our new fluid. It's important to point out that Ford Focus calls for Mercon V or Mercon V transmission fluid. It's the same fluid that goes into your transmission. If you try to use a different kind of Mercon, such as Mercon LP, or even something that's marked as just regular power steering fluid, this fluid will not work in your system, and it could actually damage your power steering pump, which could destroy the whole system. I've experienced this personally with a previous Ford Taurus I owned. Put in the wrong fluid, and a couple weeks later, I was without power steering. It can be a real hassle, so you want to be sure to have the right fluid. There are some European import fluids, or I'll even say multi-vehicle fluids. If you read on the back, this won't be in focus on this camera, but if you read on the back, you're going to want to look and see where it says suited for Mercon V or Mercon V. Alternatively, it'll sometimes say not recommended or not meant for this application. So all that we have to do now is just simply take our transmission fluid and start pouring it in, and we'll watch the line and be sure that it's properly filled up to the correct measure. So I'll go ahead and start pouring. You can see it start filling up there. And there we go. So you can see how it's leveled out there. The good news is if you go over a little bit, you have your turkey baster handy, so you can take out a little bit. Specifically, it is recommended to do this type of flush a number of times. Obviously, we're not getting all the fluid out, or at least all the fluid out in one pass. So something that you can do, which is what I've done, is you do this once, and then a couple weeks later, after some driving around, you come back and do it again. That way you're able to get out a little bit more of the old fluid, and you're able to pass it through. A lot of shops will often charge, like $50+ for this kind of service. And so this can oftentimes be a more economic and easier solution. Ultimately, it really only takes about 10 minutes, in the whole run. So once you have this wrapped up and you have the fluid in, you can go ahead and look to recycle the... Once you have the new power steering fluid in, you're pretty much good to go. Be sure to check around for any spots you might have dripped fluid, and be sure to wipe that up accordingly. You can also take your vehicle out for a test drive and make sure that everything's feeling all right. Now, the turkey baster method, it pretty much works for many vehicle applications. I really can't think of a car that might not work on. Again, just be sure you're using the correct power steering fluid. Some vehicles call for transmission fluid, while others do have a dedicated power steering fluid. Another thing you can also do is to check around and see where the power steering fluid might be able to be recycled, such as at an auto garage or automotive shop. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to comment with any videos you might like to see in the future for automotive repair.